People come from all walks of life. They all have lives they lead. Any and all are welcome here to come and chat with me.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Small Talk. Well, today's guest is someone I'm meeting for the very first time. I know very little about her. I believe she lives in Mission, and I do know, though, that she has co-authored a book. I'm looking forward to learning more. Ladies and gentlemen, Sharon Syrette. Hello, Sharon.
Hi, everyone.
Did I get your name right?
You did.
I'm notorious for mispronouncing people's names. So I just want to get a little background information, if you don't mind.
No problem.
Where were you from originally?
Okay, I was born on Vancouver Island, and I grew up in Coombs on the island, before the goats on the famous roof.
Okay.
And went to high school in Qualicum, went to university in Victoria. So that was my beginning roots. And of course, I've moved around and done other things since, but that's where I started.
All right. So what are some of the things you've done?
What have I done? Well, I did a degree in education at the University of Victoria. I taught up in Kimberley. Was my first teaching job in a rural school, but they had 6 groups of grade 6, and I had 6D. They used to put dummy on the door. And then I spent 2 years in East Africa teaching in schools there in Tanzania, mostly English and a little bit of history. Traveled as much as I was able to at that time. Moved to England, where my sister was, for 6 months, and then went to Ontario, where my other sister was living. Worked in schools there as a special education teacher for 2.5 years, just outside Sault Ste. Marie, right. Ontario. Mm-hmm. Came back to British Columbia, got a job that was the beginning of the community college movement, got a job at Malaspina College, which I absolutely loved, and through that then got hired at Fraser Valley College in the Abbotsford, Chilliwack in 1975, when it was brand new. Wow. I was number 7 on the employee list. Wow. So and then I've done all kinds of things since, but that's my exciting past.
Well, it sounds interesting. It really sounds interesting. Let's talk about the book that you
absolutely
wrote. Tell me about the book.
Okay, so this probably shows up backwards.
No, it shows fine. I can see it fine.
Courage to Speak. Mm-hmm. It is about the writing of the Halkomelem language. The language itself, of course, is thousands and thousands of years old, but it was always oral. And in the 1970s, through Kokolitsa and working with a professional linguist, a group of elders who had spoken fluent Halkomelem since they were born were invited to come in and help record the language for a linguist. And as a result of that project, they produced the first dictionary. They learned and apparently were very tough with the linguist. You listen to us. This is our language. We do it our way. This is not an academic exercise. So they produced a language curriculum, which is now Stalo Sitel, used in many, many schools in our area. And 10 of them were certified as teachers of the Halkomelem language, so they could work in not just on reserve schools, but in schools around the Fraser Valley as well. So it was a really exciting time.
That's awesome. What made you decide to get involved in it, in the writing of the book?
I've known Shirley for years. She worked for Kokolitsa when I was working for Fraser Valley College way back in the 70s, 80s, etc. So we've known each other in passing.
Sorry, I just want to say
she's the other author, right? We have also spent quite a bit of time doing genealogy together, helping people discover and search out and research their Aboriginal background. Who am I related to? What does that mean, etc. So that was our first connection that we had. And then I was doing something in Agassiz, which is where Siamsalot lives, and they had a small community project for seniors to write and publish something, personal stories. And I said, oh, isn't that a great idea? We should choose a couple of the older women who've passed now, who still have families in the area. And so we started by writing the stories of the 3 women that are in the book. And then said, hey, this could be much more. So we worked together. This actually took us 4 years.
Okay.
Shirley, it's her personal story. It's her experience. She was working with those elders. She was an employee of Kokalitsa. She was helping arrange trips. She was visiting with them, helping, giving transportation, etc. So she knew all of these people firsthand, and all the wonderful stories in the book are really Siamtralot's stories, not mine. But I have been an English teacher forever. I've also been a writer. And so the two of us worked extremely well. I was sort of an editor and, well, let's put this here. No, we've got too much. Let's not repeat. So that it took us, as I say, over 4 years, and we developed a really good working team through that. We were able to bring in a young artist, Connie Thomas, who did the drawings that are in the book.
Right.
Young man in Maple Ridge who does the photo enhancement. And so we found photos from various archives and personal collections. And Cody Gushu, who is the our photo enhancement person, made those look really good for us so that they're excellent photos. And Cindy Waters. Cindy was the person who actually put the manuscript into a form so it could be published. Shirley and I both have, general computer skills that people our age would have. So it was a team in the last year, pulling this all together and saying, what do we want? What do we include? We wanted personal stories.
Right.
We didn't want an academic, there is a dictionary, there is curriculum, there are 7 or 8 teaching stories that have been developed that are used in this Stalo Sato. We wanted personal stories, and Shirley really felt the need to honor these elders that she had worked with for so long. And so that was part of our motivation all along. How do we do this in a way that will show respect, both to the elders themselves and to their families, the surviving people? We have many photos that have been donated by members of the family that show up in the book. And that's what I get phone calls. She gets phone calls. Oh, that's wonderful. I see that picture of Nancy teaching a kindergarten class. That was my kindergarten class. I was the regular teacher. Wow. So those are really heartwarming that people are looking at these stories and saying, hey, that's my family. That's my experience. So it's a very exciting thing for us to have been involved in.
It sounds awesome. Couldn't you show some of those pictures that are in the book and maybe explain what they are?
I was hoping to do a share screen, but I didn't quite get around to it. But it's life is busy, and neither one of us are really great. So I don't. Here's the prayer with the stories, with the drawings.
Okay. Yeah.
I think she's a grade 9 or 10 student. There, and the prayer both in English and in Halkomelem is there. And one of my favorite photos, all of these elders were people who had gone to residential school. They maybe had a grade 3 or 4 education. Right. They were not people who had been going to universities and colleges and things of that sort. They were people who were raised in a traditional way, lived a traditional language, raised their families, went logging or fishing or, subsistence type work that was available. And so the fact that they were involved, and this one, there it is. This photo, if anyone has the book. I love this one because this shows the group of elders and that machine that they're using there this is about 1976 or maybe 78. That is a language master. That was the high-tech technology for language in those days. The little card that had a piece of tape on it, and you would put it through and someone would speak the word in Halkomelem, and the language master would record it. And then they would turn it over and the English word would be on the other side. And not only did they use that in the project, they learned to operate it themselves. And again, think back to the 70s and 80s. None of us had computers. Right. None of us had that kind of experience. And again, we're talking with people who have learned from life experience, who haven't had a formal education, but who immediately got what it was that needed to happen. And Siamtralot's stories are wonderful about how they would put someone in their place if the linguist said, oh, and they say, no, it is our language. You listen to us. We will tell you. That's a really important concept that, again, respected now more, but in the late 70s, 80s, the academic expert tended to be the driver of projects, tended to be the one. And these elders just said, no, it's our language. We know this is the way we have to do it. And they were very lucky to have Brent Galloway, who was very flexible and said, sure, teach me what I need to know.
Very good. Yeah, because that's unusual, isn't it?
It was then. It's now a little bit, although it hasn't changed as much as I wish it would,
Yeah,
but it has
sure.
changed a little bit.
Right. Now, I know the book is sold at the Stolo gift shop here in Chilliwack.
That's
where
correct.
else is it sold? If somebody wanted to get a copy, where could they go?
Okay, it's at the Stolo gift shop on Stolo territory, Stolo Nation land in Sardis, and we've just supplied them with some more, so they're ready
Extra
to
copies?
continue sales. The Agassiz Harrison Museum in Agassiz has copies that they've made available, and we get a lot of orders through our email. I mail out a lot of books to people who aren't in the Lower Mainland, and we've sent books to Lummi and Spokane and Northern BC, Fort St. James, and so a lot of people are ordering through our email.
That's the Ancestor Connections.
ancestorconnections@gmail.com.
Yeah. So somebody can use that email to get a hold of you if they want a
That's
copy
right.
of the book, or even to learn more about, do you have, speaking of, sorry, I just sort of go all over the place once in a while.
That's fine.
Do you have any other plans, like of writing another book between you and Shirley? What are your future plans, or are you looking
What are our
at it?
future plans? Both of us have been very involved with family medical things in the last month. So we haven't talked a lot about that, but we certainly are still interested. There's hundreds of stories. What we are trying to do is to encourage other people to tell your family story. And of course, we get people who say, well, I can't write, or nobody would want to, etc. And it's like, that's what we can help you through that.
Right.
We can anything from simply editing, rearranging, this story should be first instead of third. In your book, here's where would you get pictures, and those publishing type things. You have to give credit. If you're using photos, you need to say, what's the source of those? So that's our focus now, is more helping others. And we have two individuals who've been part of our genealogy group and who are very interested that we are currently working with. When are those going to be done? We don't know, because it's their book, their pace.
Right. Are there a lot of non-Indigenous people interested in the book?
Absolutely. A lot of people, we've had a lot of interest from the universities and colleges where they have First Nation studies, and First Nation studies could be anyone could be enrolling in those classes.
Okay.
We had a small grant from the federal government, so we were able to put a copy of the book in each of the middle schools and high schools in the Fraser Valley. And we're really encouraging, of course, teachers and students and support workers to access those. And we've had a number of people then order them. I have a friend on Vancouver Island who's not Indigenous, who got 2 copies originally, and every time I pick up the phone from her, it's like, hey, I need another 2 copies. I said, why don't you just get 10, and then you've got them when you need them? And she's sending them to contacts, people she knows that work at universities or that just have an interest. There's a huge groundswell of interest now in Indigenous people in their lives.
Yes, and I'm glad. For one, I'm glad, because sometimes, like as a non-Indigenous person, I get so shamed by the treatment of Indigenous people, and I hear things and people's opinions of them, and I'm thinking, why do people feel that way? Why is it necessary to make somebody look like, put them down, just because they didn't traditionally live the way the Europeans did when they came over? And it's really tough. It really is tough to get people to listen or to unlearn all the things we heard through, movies and such about how the natives behaved.
Yes. One of my nieces on my side of the family, so she's not Indigenous at all. Her mom's in hospital, and so we were meeting and sitting in the sun and talking. And she said, "Auntie, I saw this documentary on residential schools. You wouldn't believe what happened." And I said, "Sweetie, let me remind you, I've been in a partnership for 44 years with an Indigenous man. We spend most of our time in that family. We have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. We're in and out of the schools. I'm on the Sewalsa West Advisory Council for the Mission School District. Yeah, I would believe. I would also believe that there are others. There are lots of stories that aren't told as yet about residential school. Mission has Fraser River Heritage Park, which is a wonderful place, and that's where the original St. Mary's Indian Residential School was until the late 60s. My mother-in-law and my husband, etc. My mother-in-law went to school there, and we were up there for something walking, and she said, "See these trees? Huge chestnut trees, just absolutely huge. There's a line of about 6 or 8 of them." I said, "Yeah, aren't they lovely?" She said, "I planted those in the 1920s. She said, "I might have been 7, 6, 7, 8. The trees were as tall as I was at that age. And look at them now." Now, to me, that is just as meaningful a story of St. Mary's and the experience that people had there and the pride that she had in saying, "I helped plant those, and those trees are still there." Right. So to me, that's also an important story. Yes, tell the stories about children taken from their families and the education they did or didn't get and how they were treated, but also tell those other stories.
It's kind of simple in a way, but beautiful at the same time, right? Like about her planting the trees. Yeah. And it's, as we all have mixed memories. If someone said to me, "Sharon, tell me all the worst things that ever happened in your life," we could have a 3-day conversation. But if they said, "Sharon, what were the highlights? What were those great things? Or what were those experiences you learned from?" Then it would be a different conversation. And I think that's where we are now. I hope that's where we are in Canadian society, that people are saying, okay, everybody's story counts. Everybody's story is important. And many of us have common memories, common things. So when older people are reading this book about the women in the Indian Homemakers Association on reserve and trying to improve conditions and knitting blankets when new babies were being born, that's not unique to Indigenous women. Right. In small rural communities right across Canada, new babies were born and people had a shower and knitted blankets and hats and things. So that's what, to me, is really, that's one of the things that grabs me about this book. It shows people who haven't ever spoken to an Indigenous person or recognized maybe someone on the street or whatever. It shows them, yes, they had a very different life. They come from a different place, a different worldview, but there are some common experiences. And if we start from the common rather than from the difference, if we start from how we are all have a human experience, then we can have a conversation rather than those really negative and stereotyped things that had been. And most of us didn't learn anything in school. There was nothing in the curriculum. I learned more about East Africa in the curriculum than I did about what were then called Canadian Indians. Absolutely. I totally agree. I'm the same thing. I was born in 1948, and we never, although I have, I think I told you, I have my aunt is First Nations, but we didn't know a lot of her life, but she didn't share those things. Yeah. She lived off the reserve because she was married to my mother's brother, and they moved, into our town where we were. But there would be no incentive, I think, at that time for her to sit with a non-Indigenous family and talk about her life. Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily there. I grew up on Vancouver Island, as I said. My dad knew people from Nanu's Bay, which was one of the closer reserves, and from Big Qualicum. But they weren't people that we socialized with or spent a lot of time with. They might go fishing or clamming or picking oysters or whatever. But one of the things that Siamflot said about this whole process of the language, and it really illustrates to me the difference between sending kids to school where there's a book and a blackboard and chalk and whatever was that while they were doing this whole language project, they went on what we now call field trips. Right. They would go out to a fishing spot on the Fraser River, or they would go up to a mountain area where they used to pick berries. And that's where they would then record the words. When you're having that experience, instead of thinking about something out there, you're there on the riverbank having that experience and the language and the words and what you call things. And then the disagreements sometimes, because there isn't always one way of saying something. Sure. And the dialect might sound a little different. Mm-hmm. If somebody's from higher up the Fraser River or from here. So those experiences were hugely important. And that's what we talk to young people who are going into education, people who are going to be teachers. Don't start from a paper handout or a photocopy or a textbook. Have an experience, whatever it is. Go out even on the playground and say, what do you see? Trees. Well, what are they? I guess they're fir trees. Are they all fir trees? No, there's a cedar tree over there. There's a hemlock. Suddenly you're getting a very different, and then of course you can get into language. What are those called? What are those, whatever? Well, how would you use them? Why are they important? That to me is a huge piece of I guess, why we persisted in writing the book. Okay. We need to make sure that people in education settings, people in families, wherever they are able to see that learning from experience is a critical way of learning about the world and seeing the world and making decisions about what are your values. It depends on your experience very often. I could go on forever.
Well, it's so fascinating. Now, just before I end the show, show the book once again, please, and then remind people where they can get a copy. So
okay, it's called Courage to Speak, Honoring Ancestors' Voices. And as again, Siamelet pointed out, this isn't necessarily everyone who was involved in the project, but people that we had information about and photos, and that families said, "Oh yes, we'd love to have that in there." So you can get it at Stalo Gift Shop at Stalo Nation in Chilliwack, at the Agassiz Harrison Museum in Agassiz, or through our email, which is ancestorconnections, a single word, ancestorconnections@gmail.com.
Wow, that's really, sorry to interrupt you. That was awesome. So just stay on camera. I'm just going to say goodbye to the audience, okay? Sure. Just stay with me for a second. I hope you were fascinated as I was. I think it's important for people to pay attention to what's happening to others other than the privileged white people. Sorry, I shouldn't say it that way, but sometimes that's what I feel that happens. Yeah. Check out the book. Just find out a little bit more what people went through or what they have to say. Anyway, so I hope you watch the show again. Until then, everyone, peace out. Thanks for watching.
Can I just add that yes. Nancy has agreed that she will interview Siamtalot in the future. Today, Siamtalot got called to a medical appointment, and you can't turn it down when it comes up. So Nancy has said, yes, I will interview Siamtalot, because her perspective is being right there on the spot.
Right. It'd be my pleasure to do that. Thank you for reminding me of that. And thank you for letting everybody know. So hold on. And I'm just going to say again, bye, everybody. Hope to see you again. Bye for now.
A sense of community, Chilliwack's a place to be. A sense of community when you're free. Rolling through the mountains, rolling through the valley, rolling through paradise with me. It's multicultural, you're sure to see it all. Chilliwack's the place to be, you'll see. Come party in the park, go dancing after dark. Chilliwack's the place to be, you'll see.